This has to do with the UFC and their TV rights. I know that I think there's an argument. Well, people think that they're going to have more than one package, which I think is right. I think they're going to split up their package. The weekly television, I know the hardcores watch. I know some casuals who just like to watch fighting on Saturday watch. I haven't watched a normal UFC non-pay-per-view show in a very long time. I don't know what the value of that is. I know they'd still do fairly good ratings, so I imagine there's some value there, some pretty decent value, actually. The pay-per-views, on the other hand, I think are the wild card. What do you do with the pay-per-views? ESPN has them, and you have to subscribe to ESPN Plus, which is going to become ESPN Select. And then it gets even crazier because we're going to have the flagship. And what do you get with the flagship? I think they should, if they wanted to do something, if they wanted to sell that flagship membership, put the UFC pay-per-views for free if you subscribe to the flagship. That would be interesting if they do that. But also, there's the Netflix component. I know WBD wants to be in these conversations. I don't know how serious they are in these conversations. It would be great for their weekends to have UFC stuff. I don't know how serious they are. They don't seem like a very serious company right now to me. That's why I say that.
Oh yeah, well, go watch Collision on Max.
Yeah, that's one. And changing the name from Max back to HBO Max, like all this nonsense that's happening. So now with Netflix in the competition for these rights, I see a lot of people saying, well, maybe Netflix should just buy out the 12 pay-per-views and then show them as monthly hooks to the UFC fan. I very much understand that rationale. But I almost wonder if the best way to do this for Netflix is to buy 1 or 2 or 3 or 4, maybe that's the max, of the fights, kind of like what they did with Jake Paul and Mike Tyson. Like, if you say to Dana White, we want Conor, and who knows, he's a madman. I don't even know if this would work. We are paying you X number of dollars to put this fight on, and he has to be in it or no deal. How does that change in negotiations? Who knows? Conor's always also hurt all the time, so it may not even ever happen. But you create this relationship with UFC where they have to deliver Conor, John Jones, Pahea. You're not taking anything other than maybe their top 4 stars in these fights, and you book your calendar around, you're going to see 4 gigantic UFC shows on Netflix every year. Now, the part I haven't thought about is then what does ESPN do? Because if you're getting these shows on Netflix for free and then ESPN is charging the B-side pay-per-views and they still got to make money for them, I didn't figure that part out. I'm just exclusively talking about the Netflix piece. I think if you were to do that model, the zeitgeist right now for what UFC is, I think would just get bigger, but it also brings in more casuals. And so there's a cost there because maybe you do lose some hardcores and they become casuals. I don't know if that's better for UFC or not, but I know that 10 years ago and 15 years ago and 20 years ago, I was so much more interested in the UFC product than I am today, even though UFC is so much more popular than it was when I was into it. So I don't know what that says, and that may be my own bias in the lens that I'm speaking through, but I would eventize your top 4 shows of the year on Netflix because I think that would make it even bigger than it currently is right now.
Yeah, well, I think your fandom is probably more typical than mine, certainly, where like I'm watching every single show and every month when that pay-per-view comes up, it's almost like a sunk expense that I know it's coming and I'm going to pay it. I think that the problem is, and you kind of touched on this, like if you do that thing of having these 4 big events every year on Netflix, not only are you having that thing where, okay, we're getting the big shows for free, but we got to pay for the lesser shows. Like that doesn't make a lot of sense. But then the other part of that is, okay, so let's say the big shows are like April, July, September, and December. So those 4 months, all of a sudden now those UFC fans, they're being forced to skip a show because you're not paying that 80, $90 a month in April because there's no UFC pay-per-view this month. And now it's like, hey, I didn't buy it this month. Maybe May comes along and you look at the card and you look at this past weekend's card. I was like, I'm not paying $90 for a show headlined by, whatever, Jack Della Maddalena and Bilal Muhammad,
Yeah.
with Valentina Shevchenko and Manon Fiorot in the co-main.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, like the following week, there's a show on ESPN Plus that's free that take away that the fact there's no title fights. It was a much better show. And
who was in the main event of that one?
God, I just watched and I can't even remember. I swear to God, I have no idea. It was at the Apex. I watched it. God, Ryan's gonna kill me for not knowing. I just watched it. Oh, Gilbert Burns and
yeah. Okay, that because
yeah.
I knew there was a name fighter on the show who lost, and
he lost. Yeah, and it was God. Who did he lose to? God, I should know this. But the point being, like, it was, there was a lot of good names on the card, and the fact is like that card was free. And most of these pay-per-views now take away the July International Fight Week card. They had to make up a title fight between two guys, neither one of them have a belt. It's Charles Oliveira and God, see, I'm so bad. I can't even remember who he's fighting. But they're fighting because Islam Makhachev vacated the lightweight title because he's moving up to welterweight. So they're having a fight. Oh, Ilia Topuria, the former featherweight champion.
Right.
So he vacates his belt of featherweight, moves up to lightweight. Now he's fighting Oliveira for the vacant lightweight title. And that's it. And everything else on the card, it's just like it's a bunch of fights. And you take away that main event and it's a fight night card. So again, like I think like on this next round of things, like whoever buys this, I feel like they got to get away from the idea of making people spend 80, $90 a month on a show. Maybe the solution is you talked about, you order the flagship and you get the pay-per-views for free. Maybe they do like you get the pay-per-views for half price if you order the flagship. And so you're paying that, whatever it's going to be, $30 a month, but you're getting the UFC. So it's almost like if you're a UFC fan, it's almost like you're getting the flagship for free, but they're committing to where they've got your money every month.
Yeah.
And then at that point, then maybe they can afford to piece off the bigger events and either sell them as a separate package to ESPN that these aren't included on your flagship, like what people were talking about with WrestleMania, where they should have taken WrestleMania off of the WWE network and done it separately as a pay-per-view. And they could do that, and then they can shop it to Netflix, to WBD, to whatever. I do think that you need to have some sort of a presence other than these big events on Netflix in order to get the casual Netflix audience watching UFC if they're not already doing that.
But I think the Mike Tyson and Jake Paul thing proved otherwise, right?
Did it? I guess,
there's
yeah.
no boxing. There was no boxing on that network.
That's true, but it's Mike Tyson. Like everybody knows.
But that would be the play, right? If you want to see John Jones, then
if you did that with Jake Paul and Triple G, let's say, I don't think it would have been nearly as successful.
No way. Well, and we're gonna see the current version of what that is with Canelo and Terrence Crawford. It's going to be much smaller for the casual fan, but it is an actual real fight to the hardcore boxing fan and to the sport. And so I think you see kind of the difference in that.